Welcome back to the program. Of course, a lot of attention being paid to Los Angeles with the riots that are happening there, the arguments over who should be in our country and who should not, illegal aliens, the open border, everything that happened with the Biden administration is all up for debate right now. Stephen Cazares is a former federal prosecutor, current partner at Foundation Law. He is in California. Now, the California National Guard has been called in to Los Angeles, now 4,000 strong. U.S. Marines also brought in to protect federal buildings there. And I wanted to get the take of the prosecutors in that area. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. Look, you sent me a note here, and I want to share it with the folks because you say historically there's been a high priority placed on prosecution of aliens, certainly those with felony convictions, which are the people that Donald Trump and Tom Homan and Kristi Noem are targeting first and foremost are these violent felons, a lot of them. It's under Section 1326. And you say every former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles for the last 3 decades or more, they cut their teeth on these kinds of cases. This is where they begin their career. And yet somehow now taking these people out of the country is causing riots in the streets. What in the world is going on?
You know, I think people have some misperception about kind of how immigration enforcement has been effected, executed historically. You know, I mean, everyone is familiar with the tab on the Obama administration as being the deporter in chief. I mean, during that time period, you know, there was always a priority on prosecution of undocumented aliens who have felony convictions. Oftentimes, there's drugs, gang violence, things like that. So it was always a priority under the Bush W administration, the Obama administration. I was still a federal prosecutor under Trump 1, and it remained a priority then. So the prosecution of aliens with criminal offenses, that's kind of routine and par for the course. Every federal prosecutor spent their first 6 months to a year, typically in Southern California, cutting their teeth, learning how to do the job, in part on a lot of those cases.
Let me ask you about the Abreu Garcia case. He is a gentleman from Maryland sent to El Salvador and now returned to the United States. It sounds like his fortunes did not improve. In fact, they may have gotten worse in some ways because he's coming back to be prosecuted here for human trafficking and smuggling with the intent to make money. A couple of charges against him. They carry up to 20 years in prison. Once he gets through that process, regardless of the outcome, he's going to be deported again back to El Salvador. It doesn't seem like he did very well, but it's become the case celeb for those on the left. They want to defend this guy who clearly is involved with human trafficking, drug gangs, and so on and so forth. Do you find that unusual?
Well, I mean, at this point, look, I mean, the way federal prosecutors always talk about these sorts of things, currently they're allegations. You know, eventually he'll go to court, he'll be tried, either he'll take a plea or a jury will convict him, or maybe they won't. Who knows? But at least at this point in time, there's a grand jury that's found probable cause that he's committed these offenses. And that's how the system's supposed to work, basically. You know, it's the community that decides who should be charged through the grand jury, and it's the community who will decide through a jury trial whether the individual's guilty or not. That's the system at work.
When you talk about local communities will decide, I can't help but have these images in my head of the LAPD getting chunks of concrete thrown at their cars or cars set on fire, ICE agents and federal law enforcement getting bricks and rocks thrown at their cars as they come through on certain streets and roads. And when the president said, look, we need to bring in the National Guard to slow this down, it was Gavin Newsom and others said, we don't need this. We don't need your help. You're gonna stir it up. It looks like it was already stirred up, Stephen. I'm trying to understand, when it comes to law enforcement, do local jurisdictions decide?
Typically, when you're talking about street crime, like what you're witnessing, some of these instigators during these protests, you know, there are people who are peacefully protesting, and there are others who are really trying to stir it up, and they've always been around and they continue to be around. Those are local crimes typically. So typically that would be the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office prosecuting the case, and the LAPD and or LA County Sheriffs as far as the investigating officers who would take care of these sorts of things. So that's, again, pretty standard par for the course. To the extent, you know, these things get out of hand, i.e. what happened after the Rodney King acquittals and those riots, in that situation, Governor Wilson requested the help because local authorities were clearly unable to handle the mass kind of protests, riots, looting, things like that happened in '92. I'm not sure we've quite got there yet here in Los Angeles. Over the weekend, things were pretty rough, as everybody could see on their TVs. But we'll see going forward.
Do you think it was? Do you suggest that it was premature for Donald Trump to call in the National Guard, to federalize the National Guard, to calm things down? That's what I'm asking you.
There's an argument to be made that to the extent ICE agents right now are executing their duties to enforce immigration laws, and persons are interfering with them. If that's the case, then sure, some help and some protection would be warranted. There's an argument to me: is protests, is that interfering with the ICE agents executing their duties? Maybe not, but again, there are.
Well, I've seen footage. I've seen footage in different parts of the country, including Los Angeles, where clearly those opposed to these deportations are clearly interfering with federal agents doing their jobs. You see the cars being attacked and burned, and that was happening before the National Guard was brought in. It didn't. From where I stand, it didn't seem that the local police department and local sheriff's department had the situation under control, or even close for that matter. And that's why I think Donald Trump acted. He doesn't want to see this get completely out of hand.
I think that's right. What happened in Paramount, which is really where it started in South LA,
right?
Some of the protests against the ICE actions there were clearly getting in the way of the ICE officers doing their jobs. Now, I'm not sure whether or not local authorities were told ahead of time where the raids were going to take place, and there may have been strategic reasons not to share that information. But one could say local officers having to respond after these things have taken place without being given a heads up. A heads up might give local authorities a chance to assist and or protect the operations, even if they're not participating, which I think local rules and laws don't permit them to really participate.
Also a violation. It's one thing to interfere with the officers. It's nothing to interfere with federal law altogether. Dwight Eisenhower called in the National Guard and federalized them in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957 because the governor of that state was refusing to allow 9 black kids into high school there. So, this is not unprecedented. The left would have you believe it is. It certainly is not. The president has the discretion to federalize the National Guard, to have law and order, to bring peace back to the situation. I'll give you the last word here, Stephen.
Hopefully things calm down. I don't think anyone wants to see criminal aliens, undocumented persons violating, breaking the law, and not being prosecuted. That's the norm. That should continue. And I would hope both sides can see that as being kind of a just outcome.
Stephen Cazares, I completely agree with you. If you commit violent crimes and you're in the country illegally, prosecute, deport. It's pretty simple. It's what's always gone on. I appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
There you have it. All right, look, enforcing the federal laws, prosecuting people, and then having them removed from the country. That's what we should do, and we're on the right path. I'll take a break and be right back. You're watching and listening to The Steve Gruber Show.